Anika D'Souza thought she was stepping into a dream when she left India to marry Ethan Collard in America. But within 6 months, her fairy tale turned into a nightmare buried beneath suburban silence. Anika D'Souza had always been the kind of woman who believed in destiny. Born and raised in Pune, India, her world was filled with the sound of busy streets, temple bells, and her own quiet determination to make something of herself. As a young software engineer, she worked long hours at her firm, balancing family expectations with her personal ambitions. Her friends often described her as focused but soft-hearted, the type of person who dreamed of both success and love. Her life began to change when she was assigned to an international project that connected her team with a company in Seattle. That was where she first encountered Ethan Collard. Ethan, an American software consultant with striking blue eyes and an easy charm, immediately stood out during their virtual meetings. He praised her skills, asked thoughtful questions, and always seemed genuinely interested in her life outside of work. Their professional chats turned personal over time. Soon their calls stretched late into the night, and Anika found herself waiting for the familiar sound of his voice through her laptop speakers. Ethan sent her photos of Seattle, misty skylines, coffee shops by the waterfront, and the quiet beauty of his neighborhood. It felt like an entirely different world, and she longed to see it. Over months, their bond deepened into something that felt fated. Ethan flew to India under the pretense of business, but spent most of his time with Anika and her family. Her parents were cautious, but eventually warmed to his politeness and the respect he showed. He promised them that he would take care of their daughter, offering her a stable, beautiful life in America. Within weeks, their engagement was official, celebrated with family dinners and pictures that filled social media feeds. To everyone around them, Anika's life looked like a dream. A love story that had crossed borders and defied distance. The wedding took place quietly in Pune, with Ethan's family attending through video calls. After a short honeymoon in Kerala, Anika packed her life into 2 suitcases and boarded a plane to Seattle. Her friends hugged her goodbye, telling her she was the luckiest of them all. When she landed, Ethan greeted her with flowers at the airport, his smile wide and welcoming. The first few weeks in their new home were filled with laughter, decorating their house, and small adventures. She posted cheerful photos of morning coffee dates, scenic drives, and cozy evenings. But slowly, beneath the excitement, Anika began to notice small cracks. Ethan's moods were unpredictable. He could be sweet one day and cold the next. He disliked her talking to her family too often, saying it distracted her from their new life. She brushed it off as adjustment stress, convincing herself it would pass. What she didn't know was that the life she had built her dreams around was already beginning to unravel. 6 months later, the girl who once smiled in every photo would vanish without a trace, leaving behind only questions and a trail that would lead to unimaginable darkness. The first few months in Seattle tested Anika's patience in ways she had never imagined. The excitement of a new country began to fade as the silence inside their suburban home grew heavier each day. Ethan, who had once been affectionate and supportive, became increasingly distant. He spent most of his time locked away in his home office, rarely speaking at meals, and often ignoring her attempts at conversation. When he did speak, it was usually to correct something. The way she cleaned, the food she cooked, or how often she called her family back in India. What once felt like a partnership began to feel like a cage. Anika missed her parents deeply, but Ethan made every call difficult. He would walk around the room while she spoke, listening carefully, his expression unreadable. Soon she began to lie to her parents, telling them everything was fine because she didn't want to worry them. She had left her job in India to move here and was now completely dependent on him. Financially, emotionally, and legally. Ethan refused to let her apply for a new job, saying her visa status needed to be handled carefully. She tried to fill her days with cooking, reading, and exploring nearby places, but even that freedom didn't last long. He didn't like her going out alone. The neighbors, Caroline Beck and her husband, noticed things that didn't seem right. They saw Anika sitting alone on the porch for hours, sometimes staring at nothing. Once, Caroline spotted her crying quietly near the mailbox, but didn't know how to approach her. There were strange noises at night, too. Loud arguments, doors slamming, and once a sound like something heavy falling. Caroline mentioned it casually to her husband, but they both decided not to interfere. It was a quiet neighborhood, and everyone preferred to stay out of others' personal lives. By the 5th month of her marriage, Anika's cheerful personality had faded. She stopped smiling in photos and barely left the house. Her phone messages to her best friend back home became shorter and less frequent. When asked if she was happy, her replies were vague. "It's just different here," or "I'm adjusting." Ethan, meanwhile, became more secretive. He locked his laptop with a password and took phone calls late at night in another room. Sometimes she would wake up to find him gone, only to return at dawn, smelling faintly of alcohol and something metallic she couldn't quite identify. On the morning of their 6-month anniversary, Ethan surprised her with breakfast and a bouquet of roses. It was the first kind gesture from him in weeks. She felt hopeful for a brief moment, thinking maybe things were improving. That night, she video-called her mother and promised she would call again the next day. But that call never came. The next morning, Ethan went to work as usual. By evening, Caroline noticed the house lights still off and the car missing from the driveway. It was the last time anyone in the neighborhood saw Anika D'Souza alive. When a week passed without any word from Anika, her parents in Pune grew uneasy. Their calls went unanswered, and her WhatsApp messages showed no new activity. At first, they thought she might be busy or facing some internet issue, but as the silence stretched on, fear began to set in. Her mother contacted Ethan, who responded casually, saying Anika had gone to California to visit friends for a break. The explanation didn't sit right with them. Anika had never mentioned such plans, and she always kept her parents informed of even the smallest details of her life. The D'Souza family decided to reach out to local authorities in Seattle, filing a missing persons report through the Indian consulate. When detectives arrived at Ethan's house for questioning, his calmness felt rehearsed. He welcomed them inside, offered them coffee, and repeated the same story, that Anika needed space, that she'd been struggling emotionally, and that she might have left on her own. But the officers noticed odd things around the house. Anika's passport was still in a drawer, her phone sat on the kitchen counter, and her purse was tucked neatly in the closet. All her essential belongings were still there. It didn't look like someone had left for a trip. Detective Mason Reese led the investigation and immediately sensed inconsistencies. Ethan's timeline didn't match the neighbor's observations. Caroline Beck told police she hadn't seen Anika in several days, not since the night of a loud argument that ended abruptly. She also mentioned seeing Ethan's car leaving the driveway around 3 in the morning that same night. Surveillance footage from nearby houses confirmed a black sedan, registered to Ethan, driving out at that exact hour. He claimed he went for a drive to clear his mind, but couldn't explain why he returned 4 hours later with fresh scratches on his arms and dirt on his shoes. When officers searched the house, they discovered more unsettling clues: faint traces of bleach along the garage floor, a section of concrete in the backyard that looked newly patched, and a strong chemical smell lingering in the air. Ethan said he had done some cleaning but refused to elaborate further. The forensic team collected samples and sent them to the lab for testing. Despite growing suspicion, the lack of a body or concrete evidence made it difficult to charge him. Ethan appeared composed in front of reporters, giving interviews about his missing wife and pleading for her to return home. His performance earned him brief public sympathy, though some viewers noticed his emotionless tone. As weeks passed, the investigation stalled. Ethan stopped cooperating, hired a lawyer, and withdrew from public attention. Then, without warning, he put the house up for sale. Caroline, watching from across the street, couldn't shake the dread that something terrible had happened inside those walls. She told police about a faint burning smell one night coming from the backyard, but by the time they returned with a warrant, the place had been scrubbed clean. The trail was fading, but Detective Reese wasn't ready to give up. Somewhere, he believed, Anika's truth was still buried. Detective Mason Reese began to piece together a picture of Ethan Collard that no one had seen before. While on the surface he appeared to be a polished professional with a stable life, his past was filled with disturbing patterns that had gone unnoticed for years. As investigators dug deeper, they found inconsistencies in his employment history and a trail of short-lived relationships that ended abruptly. It wasn't long before a shocking discovery emerged. Ethan had been married before to a woman named Lauren Pierce, who had mysteriously vanished 8 years earlier. The case had been ruled as a voluntary disappearance after Ethan told authorities that Lauren had run off following marital problems. With no evidence of foul play at the time, the investigation was closed. Detective Reese reopened the old file and noticed striking similarities between Lauren's case and Anika's. Both women were young, independent, and had left their careers shortly after marrying Ethan. Both had been isolated from friends and family before disappearing. In each case, Ethan had taken out life insurance policies in their names within months of marriage. The financial motive became clearer. Records showed Ethan collected a large payout after Lauren's disappearance, claiming it as an accidental death despite her body never being found. Now he had done the same for Anika. Police decided to bring Ethan in for further questioning, but when they arrived at his home, it was empty. He had vanished overnight, leaving behind an unlocked door and a nearly empty bank account. His car was found abandoned 3 days later near the Oregon border. Inside, investigators discovered Anika's wedding ring tucked inside the glove compartment and a piece of torn fabric later identified as part of her clothing. There were faint traces of blood on the car floor, and the DNA matched Anika's. It was the first major breakthrough, but Ethan was nowhere to be found. The investigation expanded across state lines. Detectives tracked Ethan's movements through credit card activity, discovering he had purchased camping supplies and rented a small storage unit under a false name. In that storage unit, they found more chilling evidence: Anika's missing jewelry, her driver's license, and a digital camera containing photos of both Anika and Lauren taken in similar poses. It was as if he had been documenting his pattern of control and manipulation, like a private collection of trophies. 2 weeks later, a construction worker in northern Oregon stumbled upon a large plastic bundle buried near a riverbank while clearing land. Inside were human remains wrapped in tarp and duct tape. Nearby, a fragment of an Indian passport and a silver anklet engraved with the name Anika were found. Forensic analysis confirmed the remains belonged to her. Detective Reese and his team knew Ethan was now on the run, possibly using false identities. A nationwide manhunt began, with his face plastered across every major news network. The truth that had been buried for years was finally coming to light. The man who once appeared as a loving husband was now revealed to be a calculated predator, leaving a trail of vanished women behind him. But as the search intensified, investigators feared he might already be planning his next move, or his next victim. The discovery of Anika's remains shattered any illusion that her disappearance had been voluntary. Forensic reports revealed she had suffered blunt force trauma to the head, and traces of sedatives were found in her system, suggesting she had been drugged before being killed. The timeline placed her death on the same night neighbors reported hearing a violent argument and seeing Ethan's car leaving before dawn. The cold, calculated way her body was concealed told investigators they were dealing with a man who had done this before. With the evidence now undeniable, authorities issued a nationwide alert for Ethan Collard's arrest. Detective Mason Reese led the pursuit with relentless determination. Months of investigation finally paid off when a tip came from a local in Montana who had seen a man resembling Ethan living in a rented cabin deep in the forest. The cabin was isolated, surrounded by tall pines and silence, the perfect place for someone to disappear. When officers arrived, Ethan was found sitting calmly on the porch, a book in his hands, and no sign of remorse. He didn't resist arrest. Inside the cabin, police found multiple fake IDs, cash in different currencies, and a notebook filled with disturbing details about both Anika and Lauren. Each entry described their habits, fears, and the exact moment he felt control slipping. The trial that followed captivated the nation. Prosecutors portrayed Ethan as a manipulative sociopath who used charm to lure intelligent, trusting women before systematically isolating and destroying them. The defense tried to argue mental instability, but the evidence was overwhelming. Photos, emails, insurance documents, and the testimony of neighbors all pointed to one conclusion: Ethan's marriages were never about love, but about power and profit. The jury deliberated for less than a day before returning a guilty verdict on multiple counts of first-degree murder and insurance fraud. Ethan Collard was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When the verdict was announced, Anika's family wept quietly in the courtroom. Her mother held a framed photo of her daughter, the same one Anika had sent from Seattle when life still looked full of promise. The judge described Ethan's crimes as a betrayal of the most sacred trust, love itself. For Detective Reese, it marked the end of a case that had haunted him for months, but the satisfaction of justice was shadowed by the tragedy that could not be undone. Anika's ashes were returned to Pune, where her family held a small memorial service. Her mother placed the urn by the window of her old room, where Anika had once spent hours dreaming about a bright future abroad. Her story spread across the internet, shared by women around the World is a cautionary tale about blind trust and the darkness that can hide behind a perfect smile. News outlets called her the bride who never came home. She became a symbol of strength and sorrow, reminding people that even in the age of technology and connection, evil can disguise itself as love. Ethan's name faded from headlines, but Anika's story continued to live on, a haunting echo of a dream that ended in tragedy and a justice that came too late but not forgotten.